All right, before I call the meeting to order, everyone who is here in the council chambers, would you please silence your cell phones? For those joining us on the Zoom, please keep yourself muted unless you're called upon to speak. Everybody ready? Okay. The Common Council of the City of Glendale is now in session. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our clerk is excused tonight, so I'm going to ask the city administrator if he please call the roll.
Here.
Doherty.
Here.
Keller.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Here.
And we do have two alders who are excused tonight. Joanna and Philip are both out of town, so districts 4 and 6, your alders are excused. All right, yeah, lots of room over there for Alderman Schmelzing. Okay. Public comment. Glendale residents, business owners, and property owners are invited to speak to the mayor and council on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but are within the city's ability to regulate or control. Is there anyone wishing to speak to a non-agenda item? I looked right at you, Mr. Cronwell. Go right ahead. And even though we all know you, state your name and address, please.
7530 North Applewood Lane. I was encouraged to hear the update on the library capital fundraising, but I've noticed that they never actually indicate how much they've actually raised up to that point when they give this report. So I pulled the information and I thought I'd let you know. This is as of November 30th of this year. They've raised a little over $224,000. They've spent $774,000. And they have a little over $50,000 cash on hand. That doesn't include any potential pledges. It certainly doesn't include any money the foundation has set aside, but that's where it stands right now. I know they have a couple of big donations pending for the end of this year and everything, but I'd like to hear the numbers and I thought I'd let you know.
We plan to have them back at one of our meetings in January to give us an update on where those end of the year numbers come from. I did have an opportunity to meet with one of the potential big donors last week, the week before, right after Thanksgiving. And we're moving forward. It's moving forward. The January report, we will have the library director back for a January report and we'll get numbers. So,
Okay, thanks.
yep. Yeah, there's a tax benefit to some people writing checks by December 31st. So, yeah. Okay, anyone else for public comment? Seeing no one in the chambers, is there anyone on the Zoom that wishes to speak in public comment? If so, you can unmute and state your name and address. All right, we will move on with our agenda. We had 3 items on the consent agenda: the adoption of the minutes, the approval of accounts payable, and a payment to UPI for work completed on the I-43 water main replacement project. Can I get a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please? Moved by Alderman Vukovich. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Doherty. Any discussion? Without objection, we'll consider the consent agenda approved. Seeing no objections, we will move on. New business. First item is review of the National League of Cities Conference, an update from that, as well as from the Urban Alliance. I'm going to report on both of those because I attended both. And then if Alderwoman Vukovich wants to add anything to National League of Cities, because she was also there and attended different things than I did for the most part. So the National League of Cities, I was there. So it started on Wednesday afternoon. I flew in on Thursday morning. I attended the Small Cities Council reception, had a number of small city mayors I had an opportunity to talk to. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities did a reception. And then I also attended a Democratic municipal officials reception that night where I had an opportunity to talk with a number of business leaders from Milwaukee who actually were there, including the folks from Badger Meter, who were a Brown Deer company that were there. The next morning, I was actually a speaker at a breakfast. And then there was a Small Cities Council. There was the afternoon general session. Then I went to one on leaders and positive psychology. So as a researcher talking about leadership and city leadership. Saturday morning, I went to a session on embracing innovation in times of change. So I think one of the big examples that everybody agreed on was we've all learned how to hold virtual meetings, which many of us had never done before. I also went to a very interesting session on strengthening mental health care. One of the people that spoke was the mayor of a city in South Dakota who had been a sheriff and had retired as sheriff. And he was talking about mental health issues. And far too often we call on our police for mental health responses because we don't have other resources other than the police. And so he actually worked to build a mental health emergency response unit within the city government to respond to cases. So they worked in tandem with the police department. It was a very interesting session. I came away from that thinking there's so much we could do if we could find a way to work with our police and 911, emergency rescue, North Shore Fire Department and Health Department, all of them together. We had a way of having a few social workers or some people to respond. I thought it was an excellent session. And then the closing session, I know Alderman Vukovich and I were both at the closing session, a fantastic speaker, all the new NLC leaders. And then there was a Harvard researcher there talking about equity issues in education, and it was a very fascinating session. So I don't know if Alderman Vukovich, did you want to add anything more about the National League of Cities?
I did, I arrived Wednesday night, but I didn't go into anything until Thursday. The one thing that I got out of this is there really needs to be, and I talk with some of the leadership there about having a niche for our city, or cities like ours, because we are a city that's right next door to a big metropolitan city, but we have their same problems, but we don't have the population. The other things that I went to was how to do a housing study, because I know we're going to possibly be looking at some of those things, housing study, and mainly actually also joining I think it's tier 1 city, which is technically like suburban areas that are the cities around a bigger metropolitan area. I also went to I went to a seminar on funding for small cities. It was called something else, but basically it was about funding for small cities and how do you look at your revenue and then see what you can do that can either intertwine with something else so you can get grants and different sources of income. So I have like some of the pamphlets and PowerPoints, but overall, I think I always say, I've gotten more out of previous ones than I did this year, except for a cold and wanting to come into Wisconsin because it was warmer in Wisconsin than it was in Kansas City at the time. But I would suggest that if somebody go every single year, because there is something to get out of it. And now I'm looking at when we get ready to do, if we do a study on the housing, or if we do a study on something else, I have some base to ask questions on. So I would suggest that if you can go.
I'm glad you went to that one because the housing one was up against the mental health care one. And so I'm glad that we were represented at both, because that was the other one I was looking at. I'm glad you were there. Thank you. And I did bring back a swag bag and I did give it to Joanne because Joanne's insistent that, yeah, so.
I brought nothing.
Anyway, all right. Any questions? Okay, so that's National League of Cities. The Urban Alliance actually met right after Thanksgiving. Carl and I drove over to Madison and attended. And the main part of the presentation, which I'm sure is what was followed up today at the ICC meeting, I had to leave early to go teach a class, but the main part of their presentation had to do with getting more shared revenue for municipalities. The state is sitting on a $6.5 billion surplus, and they're not giving any additional money to schools. They're not giving any additional money to municipalities. And so the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Towns Association, and the Counties Association are all working together. So basically they're going in with a set of priorities, and all three of them are lobbying for the exact same priorities and hoping that the power of the towns, counties, and the league will be able to get some traction. One of the things I did come away with, and I was not, I guess, the speaker has made a number of public comments about how if he's going to give any more shared revenue or any more aid to municipalities, it's going to have to come with more reforms. And I raised a question to the group. I said, when they ask about reforms, what do they mean by reforms? Because one of the big things they talk about is consolidated services. Well, we have consolidated literally everything in the North Shore except for garbage collection and police. Pretty much everything else we've consolidated. And so if they're saying we have to do more reforms, or what do you do for an area like this that's already been through most of the kind of reforms they're pushing? You know, there's a big talk right now about consolidating fire. Well, we've already done that. We did that 30 years ago. So if that's one of the big pushes they make for a bunch of rural townships to start consolidating fire services, well, that's great, but that doesn't help those of us who've already done it. And so I pushed that, you know, when they push through and say there's have to be reforms and they list a whole list of things they want done, if you've already done them, you should just already qualify for the funds. So that was the big push that I made. So that was sort of the main thing at the Urban Alliance. It was a 2-hour meeting followed by a short lunch. And so it was all had to do with legislative priorities around funding and shared revenue and how the state is going to spend, if it spends, any of the $6.5 billion that it's sitting on. So yes, Alderwoman.
I want to go on the record and say that this has to be a collective. It has to go, and we have to lobby together as municipalities, as towns, as whatever, because this money is technically our money. It's our citizens' money. And every time we have to go and raise levy and do stuff, that's 6.2 was it?
6.5.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6.5 billion, not billion dollars. That is our residents. So instead of just the council writing, and since this is a public hearing, I would advise that the citizens also start writing their Congress people, writing their assembly, writing their senators, because this will affect your life. When we can't afford to do a pickup every week for garbage, and it has to be every other week, and then recycling is once a month, this will hit you. So sitting back and deciding that, you know, we'll let them handle it is not the right way to do this. Talk to your senator. In Glendale, your senator is Lena Taylor. Talk to your state rep. As of June 3rd or January 3rd, it will be Darren Madison. You have county people, get them all together and write letters, campaign. If you don't know how to do it, talk to your alder people. We'll help you get your group together to lobby, because this is what is needed. We can't sit back and just wait for us or the legislator or these you know, the leagues to do it. You have to speak.
Okay. Oh, did you want to add anything? Because there was a presentation by the league today at the ICC meeting that unfortunately I had to leave and go teach a class. So I missed that part of the meeting.
Yes, today, Mayor, at the ICC meeting, the league did another follow-up presentation on the shared revenue to try to gain some additional revenue for counties, municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. They basically leaned on the fact that they want to have this resolved by April. So now is the time for all of us communities to react to that situation, provide examples of what we've done in the past that have provided for efficiencies and collective working, as well as maybe some possible ones for the future in order to try to get them to allocate additional revenue to municipalities that have been under revenue limits for more than a decade now.
I'll work with Carl on a letter that we'll put on the agenda for our first meeting in January that would come from all of us as a common council, listing all the reforms we've already done, the cross-sharing things we've already done. So, okay. Yes, go ahead.
I would also recommend that we educate, if we do one public hearing or one public speaking where we get that information out and let people come and listen. And if we do storytelling and talk about what we need and record that and send it out, that's how we get those. So it's not just us signing. We need to have a group of people coming in and talking about it. And this is what our council is doing. Why? Because we had 100 people, we had 50 people, we had whoever is coming in to tell us this is the way that they want us to lead.
Okay. Yeah, we can actually put that on the agenda as well for our first meeting in January to schedule a public hearing. I think it's a great idea. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Alderman.
Yes, on top of matters, once that public hearing is over with, if we can find ways of it's almost like encouraging our residents to lobby on behalf of our government.
Right.
Form letters, things like that, then we can get that out in our newsletters and just highlight things that really are strained and what we've done over the past years to cut back. Because I know we have a lot of detail about how many staff we have not backfilled. We're doing a lot more work with contracted services because of that. So yeah, it's a need. So I think if we can give those details, we can try to give people what they need to go contact. I think our representatives kind of get it, but I don't know how we can reach even beyond that to our reps that are outside of the Milwaukee Metro.
Right. We'll move on then to our items of business. First, item 4B is Wisconsin Department of Justice grant covering cloud-based storage migration costs. I think this is the chief, right?
At a couple meetings ago, the council approved us transitioning from server-based storage to cloud-based storage for our squad and body cams. And at that time, we said that we were looking to get a grant from the Department of Justice for that. Well, we did put in for a grant and we did receive a grant from DOJ for the migration fees, a total of $38,625. That includes a state funds and a local match. So if you approve the grant, we will be receiving $19,312.50 to help offset our migration fees.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so
Always wonderful when
it's
someone
always
else
nice.
is
It's more than we
saying,
expected. We were hoping to, basically with initial talks, we thought it was going to be several $1,000s shorter of that, but they did their calculations and it came out good. So it didn't cover the whole cost, but pretty much close to it.
Wonderful. We get a motion that we have a staff recommendation to approve. We get a motion to approve the acceptance of the grant. Moved by Alderman Vukovic, second by Alderman Schmelzling. Any discussion? All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item 4C is agreement with City Water for water management services. And I will turn it over to Director of Public Works.
All right, I brought Tom Nenning here. He's the president of City Water. If there's any questions subsequent to my update and memo. So the city of Glendale's had a certain benchmarking standards. Every 3 years, we have the Wisconsin DNR sanitary survey report. We had it in 2019. We again had it this year. And out of that report came a couple of deficiencies. A couple of them are significant because they've been carried over in the 3 years. And again, nothing that's insurmountable, but one of the ones that I'm bringing tonight is the main topic is hiring more staff. So we looked at, in lieu of that, because that's quite expensive, to add another person to our water department, potentially a superintendent, of working with City Water to do that, to fill our need, to audit our department, make sure we're running as efficiently as we can be to meet those deficiencies that have been put forth by the Wisconsin DNR, and try to put a plan going forward to make sure that we're continually in compliance. Sidebar to this is, this seemed to be the year for the DNR to assess communities. So Whitefish Bay got hit pretty hard as well. And their recommendation also by the DNR was for them to hire a staff person in their water department. We were first deficient with this. Is it's a recommendation, then it goes to deficiency. That's kind of the progression in 2019. And I thought I could say, well, we'll look into it, see if we can better manage things or whatever, but that wasn't sufficient to them. So again, by April of 23 is when we're to hire another person. So again, that's why we reached out to City Water. They were approved last council meeting to do our utility billing. Now we would like them to assist with the professional water services for the department. They also do work similar capacity for the Village of Brown Deer, Village of Fox Point, for Shorewood, for Mequon, for several other communities. Tom can speak to that too if needed. So again, that's why I brought this forth, to make sure that we can be compliant with the DNR's stipulations set forth in the sanitary survey.
The DNR is saying we have to hire a person, but
That is their,
contract with a third party
That
for a
is their number
significantly
one,
reduced
correct.
cost.
and in lieu of that, we felt obviously be more cost effective to contract with City Water to serve that purpose.
Okay.
And in here, there are 4 tasks that are highlighted. The 3 of them are projects, basically is to collect data, analyze data, and provide a report on the deficiencies. The 4th one is called utility management, which we would essentially purchase up to 520 hours of their time on an annual basis. And that would be a maximum amount of hours that we would be allowed to purchase under city water. We also have a maximum contract amount in there that assumes the highest priced person in the contract. I think we can strongly assume that the highest priced person in the contract wouldn't be working the full amount of hours. So until we exactly know how many hours are necessary in a year by year, we put in the maximum, but we foresee it coming in significantly less than that.
I was gonna say, I reached out earlier in advance and it really just seems like it's a matter of, if I can paraphrase, taking some of the things that the DPW, we just mentioned about staff and how there's only so many hours in the day that they just don't have the ability to keep up with and have it done by a contracted individual or a group of individuals who has that flexibility. So I think that was the main thing. Just wanted to understand if it was specific to the city of Glendale or the water utility. It's just the city of Glendale services.
Thank you. Alderman Doherty.
Anything as far as where we're at in 23 budget, as far as where this expense will fit?
To be honest, this didn't come up as part of the budget process, so we will have to do a budget amendment, but we do have a surplus in the water fund, so it will fit within the budgeted amount.
Good, thank
To that point, Alderman Schmelzing, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you said earlier with that is that even since 3 years have come, I mean, the amount of tasks that our water department is tasked with, because what we do is each time there's any project in the city, so a fiber boring project or any kind of other project that touches our facilities, we have to go out and mark all of our utilities, and that's stretching them since. So quite frankly, even our water main project we're on now on G. Nicolay and North Port Washington Road is taking away time from marking utilities. So our guys are kind of scrambling with that. So it's just, I guess it's a good and bad thing. I mean, the Glendale's busy. There's no question. We've got a development going on, but the flip of that is we're trying to maximize what we can with our staff and make sure still that our utilities are being protected.
Gellhardt?
Going forward, then, is the cost for this passed on to the residents on their water bill, or how is this handled?
It's through the water utility.
Okay, so they, like a line item on the water bill, or is it?
It's actually through the utility. So the taxes that are paid through that would, they subsidize the utility.
The total expense in the water fund includes a revenue estimate that we will get, pump so many gallons at whatever fee. That funds the total water account, which includes contractual costs, this cost, salary costs, as well as supplies. So it's figured within there. We have to do a rate analysis sometime in the near future with this or without this to make sure that our rates are covering our expenses. So it's already included and factored into the rates that are being paid by residents and businesses in the city of Glendale.
Alderman Vukovic.
Be a great example of why we need to shared funds, shared revenue, because we are scrambling when we actually need a full down person to now use services. Not that you don't have great services, but we could hire a person to actually do this and be well versed in Glendale.
Yeah.
So just
Actually-
give an example.
Well, and actually then going along with that, if reforms are required, could Whitefish Bay and Glendale, if we were to hire a person, could we share that person between the two of us? There's those things, but we don't ever, at this point, we don't have an opportunity to share that, but that's actually one of those things we might have to look forward to if we have to somehow pull some reforms out of thin air. So
That's one of the things we try to do. And actually Whitefish further behind than we are. I mean, we were trying to, with our hydrant flushing, unidirectional flushing and things like that for our lead and copper study, they even have less persons. So we're all trying to help, but there's only so much for us to go around, unfortunately.
Right. So we do have a recommendation from staff that we approve the agreement and the addendum with City Water for the water management services. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gellhardt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Schmelzling. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Alderman Doherty, ordinance regulating the keeping of honeybees in the city of Glendale. I think you submitted this some time back.
Been a while. Yeah, thank you, John, and everybody for getting this to us. I don't see any downsides in doing it, and I think the upside is the world needs more bees, and if we can do a bit to help that, I think there's a positive to that. certainly in favor of it and would like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Do you want to go and make a motion to adopt the ordinance?
I would.
Okay,
I
is
would
there,
move that we adopt the ordinance for beekeeping in the city of Glendale.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Alderman Gelhardt. Now we're in discussion and I guess, so we've already made a motion, but go ahead, Mr. Fellows. Do you want to add anything more to that? So.
Have any questions?
There was a line in where it talks about fees, that the fees aren't themselves spelled out in this agreement. So what were the fee cost?
Staff was going to come back with you with other fees and things like that after the first of the year, but Shorewoods is $25 for the first and 10 for the second. That's very similar to chicken. So we're just going to model off of what all the other North Shore communities that do allow bees. They're just kind of there's no. If you preferred it to be $20, you know.
I just didn't
we
want it
could-
to be prohibitive. I mean,
No,
The idea
so-
behind it wasn't to fee somebody to death. That was my.
No, 25 and 10 for the renewal. So just to cover a little bit of paperwork and that type of stuff.
All right. Any further discussion?
There's a proposed amendment by Alderman Schmelzling that's in front of you regarding the notification. So this amendment, it's redlined here, basically just spells out the fact that you're required to notify all your neighbors, and you just basically sign an acknowledgement saying that you notified your neighbors as part of the application, rather than actually having them sign off on it.
Yeah, 'cause you might have. I agree. You wouldn't want somebody to, you notified them. That's all you have to do.
Right, and really the reason why I brought this forward is because this is very thorough, wonderful work putting this together, looking at other ordinances. I feel that if someone wants to have bees, there's enough protections in here that a neighbor shouldn't have an issue with it. And so I know I have a neighbor that probably wouldn't sign anything that was given to him. So I figure it's probably good just to say that you've done the notification and that's sufficient. So I figure that'd be.
Do you want to make
positive
do
amendment.
you want to make a motion then to amend the
Yes, yes.
to include this language?
Yes, I thought that at first was already adjusted, but yes, I would move to amend section F1 as noted, where it would say after the amendment, notification before an initial review permit is issued, applicant shall furnish to the city a completed application. Upon initial application, the applicant shall produce a signed acknowledgement that all residents of adjoining or diagonally abutted properties, including those, et cetera, no changes thereafter.
Okay, so the amendment's been moved. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second that.
Second by Alderman Doherty. Yes, Alderman Vukovich.
Question, if, even though there's protections and is there a appeals process? Because if somebody doesn't have to sign off, but they did acknowledge, but who knows, whatever their situation is, and they really don't want bees there, and they have a legitimate reason. I don't know what the legitimate reason is. I just say, is there an appeals process to? And I think that is just. And we can say no, or, it can go through, but.
Like, just to jump in there, I mean, like say the neighbor had, a child with allergies, bee allergies, I don't know if that would be something that might be a legitimate concern.
Well, and yeah, I'm just saying, like, they were deathly, even something, whatever it was. I think that if it's not a legitimate, what do you call it, appeal, then obviously it goes nowhere. But if there's something that we need to rethink, I just think the city should, and maybe we'll talk about it later, but I just want to put that in the head, because there should be some kind of appeals process.
Let me
just
ask.
in case, since they're not having to sign off.
Okay, so we direct it back to staff then. If neighbors are informed and one of the neighbors comes back with a complaint, how would that be addressed as city staff?
So I'll start with this, and Mr. Fellows can fill in where I don't have all the information, but right now there is no appeals process, provided somebody applies with all of the regulations, including notifying, filling out the application, paying the fee, putting the appropriate setbacks in place for where the bees should be located, then, and the right types of bees are placed there. Then there is no appeals process. It's the same thing, I believe, with our fence ordinance, that while we do require a sign off, that if somebody doesn't sign off that your neighbor doesn't want the fence can still go there. It's just is one of the parts to it. So in this sort of situation, it's really very difficult. We're making a decision to allow bees under certain circumstances and make it be a judgment. In my opinion, would be a very difficult thing to ask of staff. Because if you issue the permit, everything's fine. A year later, a new resident could move in and have a problem with bees. What do we do in those circumstances when it's already been established?
Alderman Doherty, then Alderman Vukovic.
This is well established across the country. This is not something we're dreaming up that doesn't exist other places. Bees are not wasps. There's a whole bunch of things they're not. And I think that this always gets blown out of proportion to the reality of risk. So I think trying to regulate where everyone's always got to have permission from their neighbors to do something on their property is the wrong approach. It's their property. What they're doing is a safe thing, and they have a right to exist on their property in a lawful manner. So at some point, the interest of other people on somebody else's land is not as interesting to me. So I think the way it's written is correct.
Alderman Vukovic.
I'm not saying that it has to. I agree that it can't be just because I don't want them there. It can't be because I don't feel like having all the bees around. It has to be like a serious medical condition or something like that. And once and the other thing is, once it is approved, even if a neighbor comes in, that's approved and that is grandfather, and the people who are moving or the realtor has the right to say, you know what, they have bees there and they can decide one way or the other. There is, even though it can go through, there is just, if there is a legitimate reason, but if there's not, and maybe bring it to the council if it's something like that. I'm very in favor of getting this ordinance passed. I believe anybody should have bees. The only small problem is that if somebody really has a legitimate concern about it for some reason, I mean, real, and there's no appeal process.
Gellhorn.
I think that the situation that we're talking about might be handled under the nuisance ordinances, where someone might claim that this is a nuisance and then it would be dealt with accordingly. So we might not need to have like an appeal process within this ordinance. It might be something that could be handled in the nuisance section if someone was making that allegation, and then it would essentially, go through the court process that way.
And the ordinance, go ahead.
I'm not talking about something that they just don't like it, or they don't have the idea, or they just don't want it. It's a nuisance, because I think a nuisance is something that bothers you, that is disturbing your way of life, something like that, whereas there could be a legitimate reason why they don't have bees. I understand the difference between wasps and bees. I read the whole thing the first time people brought it up. It's up to you, the council. We are a democracy. I just want to bring it up. So if it gets brought back up, we can say we discussed it and we thought one way or the other. I would just also ask, maybe I'm not thinking it right and I'm looking at the legal point of view, and I would ask Nathan to say something. Or
Recognize the city.
So I think that the notice requirement in my mind goes hand in hand with the idea that, I'll give you a concrete example. Somebody came forward and said, I'm wonderfully supportive of the environment and promoting this with bees. My only issue is I have such a horrible allergic reaction to bees that if I get bit, I'm going to die, and because the medication doesn't work on me or something like that. If that were the case, in my opinion, the municipality would have the inherent authority to say, under the, based upon the health, welfare and safety of this particular situation, I think that they have the discretion to say, well, it's not appropriate to issue, a permit in that particular instance. I think you could exercise your discretion. So I think that, I think that the notice requirement, part of that is not just to say, okay, this is going to happen, but if there was a 1 in a million situation where, it was going to pose a serious threat to health and human safety, that we would become aware of it. And I think you'd have the discretion to, talk to everybody about maybe this isn't the best place.
Okay. All right.
If I
Any
may.
other, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, the other thing is just to refresh your memory from when we talked about the bees before. Bees don't just go in your yard or even to the neighbor's yard. They're probably, they're in their hive, but they're going very long distances. So it's not so much about the adjacencies that the hive is actually next door, but it's literally they're traveling blocks. So you could still have a hive 2 blocks from you that if you had an allergic reaction to bees, you're never going to be notified. There's just wildlife in your yard. So it's not that they have a finite travel distance just to your neighbor's yard. So,
All right.
So what you're saying, the best remedy then is just,
I
Just
guess
a-
what I'm
just a
saying,
lawn.
I think
No-
it's
no flowers.
I think it's a legitimate conversation, but
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out that not allowing the beehive next to someone who is allergic isn't going to prevent bees
Right.
in their yard. They're going to come from somewhere else. They may be honeybees, they may be wasps, they may be of a different variety. So,
helpful. Thank you.
And there is a subsection here, subsection 9, that talks about aggressive characteristics of the hives too, and they could remove them in that circumstances.
Alderman Gellhart, go ahead.
And I'll just kind of add, just like the chicken ordinances, the beekeeping is a pretty involved process. It's expensive. I don't think that we're going to have a whole lot of people doing this, to be completely honest. We had, I think, 9 people come out and get licenses to keep chickens in a city of, 13,000. So
I think
I'm
we
not
actually
too
only
worried.
have 2 right now.
2?
so, Yeah.
So
There
I'm
were
not
9
too worried.
initially, there's only 2 now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we do have an amendment on the floor. All those in favor of approving the amendment that was presented by Alderman Schmelzing, please say aye.
Hi.
Opposed, no. Amendment passes. So now we have an ordinance submitted by staff that has been amended by the council. That is before us. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the amended ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It was unanimous. Thank you all. All right, the next 3 items sort of go in tandem. One is next item is the North Shore Health Department agreement. And approving the new North Shore Health Department agreement is because we're building a new fire station that the North Shore Health Department will be housed in. So the old formulas for having one in Shorewood and one in Brown Deer go away, and we needed a new formula. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Becky Rowland here in a second from the North Shore Health Department. I'll just give you guys a quick brief update on the agreement and how it's different from the current one that's in place. The agreement will be expiring at the end of 2023, and this new agreement will start in 2024. It will be for 8 years. There is a formula in there, 2 ways that it's contributed towards the total cost for a municipality's contribution. Currently, it's 65% population, 35% communicable disease rate for that community. That's citizens living in the community. The new agreement and the formula makes it 70 and 30 respectfully, and it locks in the population and the communicable disease rates as they are today. So if the health department moves to Glendale and more Glendale residents visit it, have more communicable diseases, it doesn't mean that our rates will go up for the health department agreement. So we're trying to lock it in and be favorable for everybody in that respect. And with the agreement, the rent for the Brown Deer and the Shorewood stations will disappear in lieu of some debt service payments for the new joint facility with the Fire Protection District. And Becky, if I miss anything, or if you want to fill anything else, please do so.
Only thing I would mention is that based on the 8-year agreement, we didn't want to use the DOA data for population. And so we're going to close it out, lock it in place, and only use US Census data. So that really, I think, will favorably impact all the municipalities. Happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Schmelzing.
Just generally speaking, why the change from 65 to 70?
So my village manager at Brown Deer, he worked and reworked and then brought to the village managers, and then worked and reworked and brought to the village manager. And that was the most beneficial to all 7 municipalities, the least collateral damage, because everyone's leaning into a little bit of change.
Yeah, it didn't seem like there was a material difference for mostly
Mm-mm.
everybody. So I was just curious, you know.
Some of the change resulted in the fact that Shorewood and Brown Deer were losing some revenue based on renting part of their facilities. So it was the attempt to try to even out the costs all along as much as possible. A couple of communities, $1,000 here or there, paid more or less. So it was our attempt to try to do that.
I didn't see much of a change in the numbers. So yeah, that explains it.
All right, so we have before us then a new North Shore Health Department agreement that will take effect in just over a year. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhardt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Schmelzling. Any further discussion? Majority?
I'm always find it interesting as we move these agreements around, we always end up trying to leave it the same, so nobody has any problems, but I find it interesting sometimes on was the split good before? So I guess I understand why we ended up where we ended up, but if somebody does anything to do with improvement from this, there's no change as far as disease end of it. And then the population will just be set to the next every 10 years, right? That's the way we're heading. I mean, that makes sense to me because we're going to try to use a number that we think is verifiable. Is there anything in here that puts Glendale at any risk if the cost of building this ends up being quite a bit different, or the cost of operating it changes? The split would still stay, right?
Split stays the same, so every community would be impacted. They are locked in on increases, which is 1% above the average of the 7 communities collective bargaining agreements for police. Is that correct, Becky? So they are locked into that. Now, the terms of the debt services, we know what the contract bid amount is, unless there's a significant change order. I don't see that happening, but most of that unfortunately would be with the fire department, not necessarily the health department, because you guys are a very small portion of the total cost, less than probably 15% of the building.
I believe the health department's actually unbalanced or health department facility.
Correct. We have a nice healthy fund balance. $626,000 ARPA money. This, and there's a public health infrastructure that'll have pass through dollars.
What's your net out of pocket that you have to pay towards the buildings? Couple $100,000?
Yeah, and I think based on the borrowing it paid through the formula, it's $175,000.
Thank you.
That's not separate borrowing, right? There's just one borrowing project to build the whole building. Yeah. All right, so we've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the new North Shore Health Department agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yep, thank you. Then going next step then is the next 2 resolutions have to do with the capital budget for the Glendale Station and confirming our obligation to contribute our portion. The same resolution went out to all 7 municipalities. We all have to pass it by at least a majority in each of our municipalities. It's basically saying that if Glendale borrows the money, we're going to pay our share and everybody else is going to pay us their share so that we can meet the bond payment each year. So I'll turn it over to the chief if you have anything you want to add to it before we call for a motion to approve.
Nothing to add other than this is you promising to repay yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Most important item on the agenda, not to diminish anything else, but it basically needs to be passed by the other 6 municipalities, so they will pay us back the $8.7 million that we are borrowing to build Station 82.
Directly into the microphone.
We were in Bayside. No, Bayside's Thursday. Tomorrow night is Fox Point. Next Monday is Shorewood and Brown Deer, and we've been in River Hills and Whitefish Bay and it passed there.
Okay. Nice to know at least 2 of the other 4 are going to pay us. So, all right. Yeah, go ahead.
There's some of those other people say they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
We've gone through that before.
Yeah, with the fire stations, actually, we've not had a problem.
We've never had a problem and I've
Whitefish Bay borrowed for the Whitefish Bay remodel and Shorewood borrowed for the Shorewood remodel, and we've all agreed to
They've-
pay them and we're doing
Yeah,
it.
Bayside, most of them have been in the situation where they're borrowing for someone else and it's never been an issue. I think
Yeah.
I've never had a no in my tenure.
The first, can I get a motion to approve the resolution confirming Glendale's obligation to contribute to the North Shore Fire Department's budget to pay the debt service on bonds issued by the city of Glendale on behalf of the North Shore Fire Department? Moved by Alderman Vukovich, seconded by Alderman Schmelzling.
Like a second and every.
Okay, that's fine. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just.
Yeah.
And the whirlwind tour continues to get through all these municipalities and I appreciate that because yes, we partner as we hear on a lot of things. I just wanted to call out and it's probably more for our plan commission than for you. But I am disappointed to not see solar worked into some facet. I know I had some back and forth with our city administrator and collected some details, so I appreciate all of that. But it just doesn't ring to me, being an engineering background, that we couldn't have worked something out. And hearing that the roofing could be reduced 10% in lifespan at the Shorewood one, when that's actually mounted, I'm doing solar myself in my homes and that's mounted, I think, on shingles. I don't know for sure, but like, I just don't understand why, as a new construction, that couldn't have been worked out.
Yeah, I can explain a little bit. I'm more than happy to, because it took me a little studying to figure all this out too. So we did show at the Shorewood station, we did solar. And the payback has been about what was expected from the consultant that you hire to come and say, here's what it's going to cost and this is what it's going to pay back. When we looked at that, one thing that we're having challenges with is if the roof warranty or the lifespan of the roof on these buildings is about 30 years. That's what you're expecting to get out of a roof. The panels, depending on who you talk to, I've seen estimates of anywhere between 15 and 30 years on the panels. So we used 20 when we did our math. And the project, as you see, with the economy and construction is a lot more than we expected it was going to be a year and a half ago when I was here, probably talking to you about this. So we were pinching pennies at every point at the end. And so what I can see in the formula that we use to look at it is that you have to take the panels off to replace the roof.
Yes.
At the second. So you're going to replace your panels at, let's say, 15 or 20 years. Your roof goes at 30. Well, those panels, their full lifespan hasn't been reached if you're using a 20-year lifespan on your panels, because you've got to take them off to replace the roof. So there's a cost to taking them off. I think that's where the number is. It's about a $10,000 difference. So it's not significant, but it was an addition that under a fair amount of pressure to reduce our cost. We elected to take. We did discuss putting panels which would be to the west, or excuse me, to the east of the building in the green area. And I think the current zoning code would prevent that because of the 30 or 60-foot setback for the parkway.
That's a county parks requirement. That's
Right.
not a city of Glendale requirement. Yeah.
I mapped it out and it looked like we'd have, like it wasn't, we could still have it on our property within that. You're saying there's a further setback than onto our own property?
And I guess we could have a
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, we don't
about-
have to go into here, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no.
just,
We built a building that is solar ready and we still haven't put solar on this roof because of cost. So, I mean, I totally get where the fire department is coming from. And I appreciate the fact that they've explored it. You know, we kind of explored it a little bit. We didn't even do the full study that the fire department did, and they did include it in Shorewood, but we haven't put them on our own roof. So
generally speaking though, from my own solar, we waited to put solar on our home until we put a new roof on.
Right.
Our intention is not, well, if we're ever still gonna live there, but our intention is not to replace the solar. We would just let it at until it's like it reduces its efficiencies. You might have to replace an inverter or two. But in the end, you know, you could then just do the whole roof and the whole solar at the same time again
Good.
and not run into that, but you lose some efficiencies.
Yeah, there's just with like many issues, there's a lot, I will tell you, there's a lot of passionate people on either side of this discussion.
Right.
And I'm trying to work through the middle on find the common ground on some of those discussions.
I like the financial numbers. And when it was like a 11-year payoff period,
Yeah.
I like that part of it.
Without factoring it into the roof, before you put in the roof replacement cost, this building was estimated at just over 10-year
Yeah,
payback.
I'll let
Yeah.
it go, but I'd love to have a follow-up conversation about this because we're new construction, they can make these things work, I think.
You're not the only one who's asked. Whitefish Bay, I was asked that last week about this project too.
All right, so we do have a resolution that we've moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the resolution, please say aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carries. And then one last resolution. This is a resolution approving a multi-year capital budget for the Glendale Station 82. So approving the budget that we're about to borrow the money for. So,
Right, this is the formality to actually allow for the spending of the money for the project.
Right.
And it requires all 7 municipalities to approve it.
all right, can I get a motion to adopt, please?
so moved.
Alderman Gelhardt, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Doherty. Any discussion on this resolution? Okay, all those in favor, aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carries. The resolution is approved. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you much for your support, everyone.
Sure. Commission, committee, board and staff reports. I'm going to start here with the city attorney. Anything to report to us?
This is our final meeting of the year, so it's one of the happy holidays.
Thank you. Number 5.
I guess I have to talk a little bit about 4th of July. We've reached out to all the people who volunteered on the committee last year. I know Jessica, our head of HR and a great member of the committee, reached out to them, and then I reached out to others who are not the named members. So we've collected responses, and I'm hoping to find some time with our city administrator and Jessica to figure out what we're going to do next year, because I think we do have to make some material changes to how it operates.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything to add. I was at the ICC today, but the most important thing I would have reported on, actually Carl reported on because I had to leave. So number 3,
nothing to report tonight.
number 2,
Nothing to report tonight.
number 1. Chief.
Yes, we have 2 of our new officers will be graduating recruit school this Friday. So we're looking forward to that. And then they start the field training process, which would takes about 5 months. So hopefully by middle of May, they'll be on the road by themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chief. And city administrator.
One quick thing, if you haven't met Ken Smith, he is our new planner. He started last week with the city of Glendale. So he's a good addition to have here in the city. So we look forward to working with him.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Great to have you.
All right, with nothing else on our agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Move Alderman Gelhardt, second
Second.
by Alderman Schmelzling. All in favor of adjourning, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.
Nice work.
Really?